This is the Big Stories Podcast, where we tell the amazing and inspiring stories from across the Big 12 Conference.
I'm your host, Cleon Wall, and I wanted to explain what we have planned for this episode. The Big Stories team was planning on bringing you a brand new episode this week from Tucson, Arizona. It's the story of a para-triathlete who uses her faith to uplift others, and she's continuing that mission as she trains under a proven head coach at the University of Arizona. But as we were putting the episode together, there was a death in my wife's extended family, and the episode was put on the back burner as we attended the funeral. That episode will now drop next week. And in the coming weeks, we're going to release a story about a former Baylor soccer player who was inspired to become a cardiovascular genetic counselor after she received an emergency heart transplant. Okay, now back to today's episode. We wanted to replay a portion of one of our episodes from Season 1. The following story is one of the amazing tales we found out of Texas Tech University. We talked to Tim Siegel, former professional tennis player, and a coach of the Red Raiders men's team from 1993 to 2015. Tim's son Luke suffered severe brain damage from a traumatic golf cart accident and later passed away. To honor his son and help other families in similar situations, Tim created the Team Luke Hope for Minds Foundation. So we hope you enjoy Tim's story, and we'll be back next week with more fantastic stories from around the Big 12. The wind was blowing this spring morning as a Red Raider tennis player practiced on Court 3 at Texas Tech's tennis complex. This is a special court. It really doesn't look different from the other courts, but it has a name. Two signs declare it's Luke Siegel Court.
It wasn't until this spring that I was comfortable enough to come to the courts.
This is Luke's dad, Tim.
This was my facility, and I still picture Luke in that umpire's chair on Court 1, and knowing across the street is the hospital where Luke spent 44 days.
Tim Siegel knows a little about tennis. The New York native played collegiately at Arkansas, then professionally, and eventually got into coaching.
I began my college career coaching at SMU in 1991-92 for 2 years, and then became the head tennis coach, men's tennis coach here at Texas Tech in January of 1993, where I stayed for 23 years.
After leaving Tech, Tim coached teens in middle school and high school. He left the Red Raider program to spend more time with his family, including his 4 kids. Luke was the youngest and his only boy.
People would joke around and say, well, I bet your son won't even love sports because I'm a sports fanatic. Well, Luke was absolutely everything I could ever imagine. He was just sweet and caring and would do anything for anyone else. But in between the lines, baseball or flag football, he was a competitor. And he loved sports so much. The New Orleans Saints, when they would lose a heartbreaking game to the Falcons in the last second, he would tear up. Luke was such a special little boy. He was different than most 7, 8, 9-year-olds. He had a bit of an old soul about him, but he loved being with his dad, and that's something I'll never forget.
Tim and Luke were living an idyllic life until July 28th, 2015.
He was at a friend's house, and they owned a golf cart. I didn't know they owned it, but the golf cart landed on top of Luke's chest. I got a phone call from the father, and he told me that Luke was in an accident. And I, at the time, didn't think it was that bad by the way he made it sound. When I got to the scene of the accident, the ambulance was just leaving, and the helicopter was hovering above, and I knew it was very serious. But I just kept thinking to myself, Luke's going to be fine, because he was my boy, my hero. He's going to be fine. About 2 minutes into the hospital, my wife and I were taken into a room, and that's when a gentleman said to us that Luke was in cardiac arrest. And at that point, everything changed. And about, I don't know how many minutes later, I woke up with a mask, an oxygen mask. I don't remember much. Everything kind of went south for me. And so I just remember a nurse telling me I need to be strong for my son.
The prognosis looked grim. Doctors told Tim that Luke would never speak, open his eyes, or use his limbs again. The young boy was eventually transferred to Cook Children's Medical Center in Fort Worth, where he would spend the rest of the year.
Eventually, when we came back, January 6th of 2016, 5 months later, I was Luke's primary caregiver. I spent 24 hours a day with Luke. And I learned, how to change a trach when we were in the hospital. I then learned meds and feeds. I went to every therapy session with Luke. I guess you could say that I was the coach still. I was Luke's father, but I was Luke's coach. I coached him up to do things that we were told he would never do.
Luke was nonverbal, but Tim wanted to see if he could communicate with his son.
I said to Luke, move your tongue if you think the Saints are going to beat Denver today. He began to move his tongue. I could have lifted a car. I was so ecstatic because he understood me. It started with, Luke, move your tongue. It then became, Luke, can I hear your voice? He would open his mouth, and then occasionally sounds would come out.
Can I hear your voice? I know you're trying. Here we go. Here we go. I love you.
And I'll never forget when I said, Luke, I love you, I love you, I love you. And then he, the same amount of time that it would be to say, I love you back.
Luke and Tim's days were mainly filled with therapy appointments. At night, it was all about sports.
I was sort of the play-by-play person with Luke, telling him about what was going on in the world of football, basketball, baseball. And from that point on, we became one in a way. It was almost a spiritual relationship with Luke.
Tim knew he couldn't go back to coaching since he was Luke's primary caregiver, but he was looking for work.
I had a friend of mine suggest, why don't you start a nonprofit? And I didn't know the first thing about it, but in January of 2017, I began the Team Luke Foundation. I had a board, I had a vision, but not much else. And in May or June of 2017, I received a phone call from a woman named Rhonda Johnson who had a nonprofit called Hope for Minds. And that nonprofit was in Austin, and she was there helping a friend whose son had a non-fatal drowning. And so we got together in Austin the very next day, and we realized after about an hour, let's merge. So Team Luke Hope for Minds was formed in January of 2018.
The foundation's goal was to help the families of children who suffered traumatic brain injuries.
We help families in various ways, from financial support through education.
What's it like when you meet with these families for the first time?
I tell parents, listen, Luke did this, and Luke did that, and Luke improved here. It gives families hope because no one's brain injury is worse than my son's. And what I also tell parents initially is that neurologists and neurosurgeons, as good as they are, they don't know what the brain can do, because when they leave the hospital, we're on our own. And so we have a blueprint, we have a 80-page manual, sort of A to Z, what to expect and what to do, because there was nothing for my son when we left the hospital in Fort Worth. Good luck. And so for me, I learned a lot. I also learned that doctors, although I respect what prognosis they may give you, they don't know what the father and mother can do. They don't know the son, how hard the child's going to fight.
Tim and Luke had a good relationship with the football team and its coaches, attending practices when possible. But after the accident, Tim stayed away.
Eventually, Cliff Kingsbury, who was coaching then at the time, asked me to come to practice. And Patrick Mahomes spent time with Luke. And since then, Patrick and I have kept in touch. And I'll never forget when he said, Tim, I need the Team Luke Hope for Minds bracelets because I want to wear it on my right wrist every day. And if you see Patrick, State Farm commercials, Head and Shoulder, he's on 1 million commercials. That bracelet does not come off. And it means so much to me when he's holding up the Super Bowl trophy and you can see plain as day, Team Luke Hope for Minds.
Tim and Luke also received love and support from other athletes.
Drew Brees came to Lubbock to do an event, and he came to our house. And I know Luke knew that Drew Brees was with him, and that was one special day for sure. After 6 years, I knew that Luke was going to change the world, that Luke was going to speak, and that Luke was going to do things that we were told he would never do. And so there's no way he's going to get COVID. middle of August of 21, he got COVID. We took Luke to the hospital, and we were in a room, not even ICU. And then that night, I stayed at home, and I got a knock on my bedroom door at 4 a.m. You need to get to the hospital, Luke's in ICU. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. I was driving to the hospital, and I was at a red light, and I heard a voice, and that voice was, "You're gonna be okay, but Luke's not gonna make it." And as I walked into the ICU, the first person that greeted me was the doctor. And she said, "I don't know if your son's gonna make it." And I said, "I know."
Luke died on August 21st, 2021.
Grief it's hard to describe the feelings that I have, whether I'm going to the gravesite, whether I'm with my daughters, whether I'm watching a ball game. It just hits me like the waves just come crashing. But I know that I've got a greater cause, and I've got to continue to push forward for Luke, because I'm doing this for Luke, and Luke is speaking through me. So I have bad moments, bad days, bad weeks, but I know that I'm going to keep going because of Luke.
The Texas Tech athletics community has made sure they don't forget Luke and what he's meant to them. Luke loved to play baseball, so he's honored at the Red Raiders baseball park, Rip Griffin Stadium. You go into the large amount of stands, but off to the right of those stands is a field. You might even call it a field of dreams. It's dirt in one area and grass in the other area. It's almost like kind of a mini baseball diamond. And in the outfield, there's a sign, and it says, the Luke Siegel Sandlot.
Luke's favorite number was 3. Coach McGuire, the football coach, does not give out the number 3 anymore. Whoever is the hardest worker, the biggest fighter, the toughest competitor, the entire team votes on who that person is, and they are awarded number 3.
Red Raiders linebacker Bryce Ramirez was given the privilege to wear number 3 after coming back from a serious leg injury the year before. And then there is Luke Siegel Court at the tennis complex. Tim finally made it back to Court 3 in 2023.
The very last thing Luke and I ever did, we played tennis. And Luke said, "Dad, since you're now the middle school coach, I want to play for you." And so being on a tennis court is even difficult.
Was it hard coming today to even do the interview with me?
A year ago, it would have been harder. I wouldn't have suggested it probably. But as I said, I think it's special because I do look at Court 3 and I see Luke's name on there, and it makes me feel proud. And so I feel like this is the right place to do an interview. I've even had people tell me who've played on Court 3 that they were inspired and they were motivated more than they ever were, and they were down in the match, but they came back because when they saw the sign, they knew they had to keep fighting because Luke was such a fighter.
Thanks again for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Cleon Wall, and Big Stories is a production of BYU Radio.